Good evening, Chesterfield County Public Schools families, Chesterfield County residents, and Team Chesterfield supporters. My name is Tim Bullis, and I have the honor and privilege of leading the Communications and Community Engagement team for Chesterfield County Public Schools. And we welcome you here tonight for another Project Restart update. Tonight's town hall will focus on cohort number 3 and the return of our 4th, 5th, some of our career and technical education students, and some alternative learning students in our middle school program. We're excited that you took time here tonight to join us. We appreciate you taking advantage of this opportunity to become informed and to ask questions. Again, tonight we'll be going over cohort 3, which is scheduled to return to our schools on Monday. That would be next week. And so tonight we're going to start off with some introductions, just a little preview of what we're going to be doing. We'll go through a quick presentation that brings everyone up to speed as to where we are. We'll ask some of the folks on our panel to give some reflections upon the first week of school for cohort number 2, which is our pre-K through 3rd grade students. And then we'll get right into the question and answer period. We appreciate those families who have submitted the questions in advance. We have those listed right here. And then we'll be taking questions throughout the evening in our chat as well. I would remind everybody that the focus of tonight is on cohort number 3. As the school board integrates cohort number 4 back into our reentry plan, we will hold a separate town hall for that. If all goes according to plan and we're able to bring cohort number 4 students back on November 9th, we're looking at a town hall on October the 29th. So with that, let's get into tonight's event. I'm going to welcome everybody and thank you all for joining us here tonight too. I know we're taking you away from families as well, so thank you for your time tonight. We'll start on the far left. We have Dr. Beth Stefanko, who's one of our directors of elementary education. Monique Booth, who is another of our directors of elementary education, and next to her is Dr. Rachel Fogelsong, our 3rd director of elementary education. Immediately to my right is our chief of schools, Mr. Josh Davis. Next to Josh, Chief Operations Officer, sorry, it's been a long day for a Monday. Chief Operations Officer, Mr. Josh Davis. Next to Josh is our chief of schools, got that one right, Dr. Lisa High. And next to Dr. High is Nick Euler. He's our coordinator of the Office of Student Health Services. So we appreciate everybody, including our chief of schools, Josh Davis, for joining us here tonight. So with that, let's jump into the presentation so we can make sure that everybody is updated and informed as to where we are and where we're going. Obviously, we want to start out with the acknowledgement at the very beginning that as we have since the start of this international pandemic, we continue to believe that face-to-face instruction is best for all students under normal circumstances. We know that our students miss much more than just the academics when they're not in school. Therefore, we want them to return as safely and as quickly as possible, but again, when it is safe for all to do so. Tonight's agenda for this presentation: how did we get to where we are now? A brief look at cohort number 3, a brief discussion on hybrid learning, some transportation information, an update on facilities, and then we'll jump in again after some reflection on the first week of cohort number 2 with our Q&A for this evening. So let's start tonight with the Public Health Committee. This Public Health Committee is made up of local medical and public health experts from around the region, including VCU, the Chesterfield Health District. Some of our own staff are on this too. They meet weekly to review data and provide the school board with an update every 2 weeks. On September 14th, the Public Health Committee reported that the public health metrics for Chesterfield County that they had been reviewing were at such levels where they deemed that it was appropriate to begin to re-enter the reentry process for identified cohorts of our students. Now, I would make sure to point out that our Health Committee has been looking at data. Our instructional team and superintendent's leadership team have developed the cohorts, and working collaboratively together, we're in the process of bringing students back in. Cohort number 1, which included certain students with disabilities, returned to school on September the 29th. Cohort number 2, which included students pre-K through 3rd grade, returned to school on October the 12th, last Monday. On October the 13th, last Tuesday, the Public Health Committee provided its latest update to the school board. Based on the available metrics at that time, the committee recommended that cohort number 3, which we're here to talk about tonight, was eligible to return for in-person instruction. That cohort, number 3, is now scheduled to return to schools on October the 26th. As you all have heard throughout this process, when it began time to start looking at the possible reentry of students, our school division has advocated continuously for statewide guidance for in-person learning and for the return of in-person learning based on local data throughout this pandemic. We've heard concerns as we developed our own matrix about the wide range of numbers based on our previous metrics. And there were questions about the low ends and the high ends of the range and at what point would it be safe for students to come back in. So again, we've been continually advocating for state guidance as to when it might be safe for our students to come back in. After Cohort 1 and 2 were already approved for reentry, the Virginia Department of Health and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have weighed in, and they've now released recommendations that largely align with the school division's previously arrived at metrics. The health department and the CDC metrics do reduce the range that we previously created. One difference between their metrics and our metrics is that the state and federal levels use total cases, while our school division had used averages during the process that we have been embarked on so far. The CDC school metrics assign a value to 3 what we call core indicators. They are cases per 100,000, positivity rate, and school readiness. They also look at several secondary indicators that are identified here on the screen. With the lack of the statewide and nationwide guidance at the beginning of this process, our school division did act quickly to create an internal metric. We were ahead of the curve with our plan, and this new CDC metric that's been released validates the early approach that Mr. Euler and the committee took. The internal metric that we developed is notably similar to the CDC metric that's just been now released. And so it's important to note that our goalposts have not moved. Rather, the statewide goalposts have moved closer towards our position. The CDC metrics and the Virginia Department of Health recommendations allow for more transparency, simplicity, and importantly, statewide consistency so that we can become more aligned with each other of the 134 school districts across Virginia. This slide begins to take a look at the CDC core indicators and ranks them from lowest risk all the way to the highest risk. And again, they're looking at total cases per 100,000, not an average, the positivity rate, and the ability to implement 5 mitigation strategies. And let's identify those real quick. Those are wearing masks, social distancing, appropriate hand and respiratory hygiene, cleaning, and contact tracing. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see what this looks like and what the recommendations are based on the different colors that the state has put forward. Again, from lowest risk to high risk. When you look at lowest, you're considering full-time learning only if mitigation strategies can be maintained, and you go all the way up to the highest risk where the state health department has advised to limit in-person instruction to special education based on IEP. And we'll get to where we've been with these next couple of slides. This data was presented to the school board during its meeting last week. The current data is current as of last Sunday night, and you see that we are in an orange for the total cases per 100,000, and that is an odd-colored green, green meaning good, for positivity rate and the ability to implement 5 mitigation strategies. When it comes to school readiness, here are the 5 mitigation strategies that we referenced, and you see that we feel comfortable in answering for 9 of the 10 that we are able to implement correctly and or able to implement consistently. The only one that we've marked a no on is 6 feet of spacing for social distancing. We are unable to implement that consistently, in large part because of school buses and hallways. We feel like so far what we've seen at the elementary schools, we've been able to do a very good job with that within the classrooms. So our overall score as of last week was a 2.66, again falling into the lighter green of the 2 greens in the lower risk for transmission in schools. In the past, we've been a little bit higher, so that's positive movement as of last week. With that data in mind, the Public Health Committee last week recommended that cohort number 3 was eligible to return to in-person instruction. That's based on the CDC's overall rating of a lower risk, and it would have come up as yellow in our previous chart with our own metrics. Jumping ahead to the phased reentry of our hybrid model, again, cohort number 3 includes all of our 4th and 5th grade students, our high school students taking career and technical education courses at either of our 2 career and technical center campuses or taking the automotive class at Midlothian High School. We'll also be looking at bringing back some of our alternative education students who participate in the middle school program at CTC at Hull. We've talked before about what does the hybrid schedule look like specifically at the elementary school level, again, cohort number 3. Students participate in face-to-face learning 2 days a week and then remotely at home learning 3 days a week. Wednesday is designated as time for teacher planning, conferencing with parents and/or students, morning meeting, advisory times, and for our staff professional development. For those of you who have been tracking with us so far for K through 3, you know that we've divided students into 2 groups. Those last names starting with A through K are in person on Monday and Tuesday, and L through Z are in person Thursday and Friday. And of course, it's important to note that we have left that virtual option on the table, and parents have had the opportunity to choose that already. I want to jump ahead to the CTC hybrid schedule because I know there might be a person or two that's looking for more information about those students. Again, it's a limited number of students, but they are important. They're going to be coming to school to learn some of those hands-on certification needs that are required to get their certificate to be able to graduate. Those students will attend class at a CTC campus 1 day a week and at their home high school 1 day a week while participating remotely 3 days a week. So let's get into a little bit real quick, what does hybrid look like? And I know our elementary directors will talk a little bit more about that when we get into the Q&A. But for the 2 day a week schedule, when our students are in their schools, they're following their normal daily schedule. When they are participating remotely at home, it is asynchronous to a certain extent for 2 days. Again, Wednesday is a meeting day where everybody comes together online in the morning. But when you're at home on your off days, and I shouldn't say off days, they're not off, they're still working. When they're at home on their remote learning days, they're joining morning meetings with their class each morning. During that time, they're giving a greeting, teachers are sharing information, engaging in community building activities, and providing instruction for the students for the rest of the day who will be working from home. Our students will engage synchronously at another time during the school day as well, and that's to be determined by the teacher and/or the needs of the class. And again, Wednesday, our students are at home. It's a cleaning day for staff in our buildings in between the 2 groups of students, and our students will participate in a morning meeting to set the learning objectives for the rest of the day. I want to really focus in on 2 of the bullet points on this hybrid benefits slide. It provides for a controlled reentry process that allows us to incorporate social distancing provided by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And you'll see this really come into play a few slides down the road when we talk about transportation specifically. But it also gives our staff in our buildings a chance to monitor progress and identify and solve challenges prior to other cohorts returning to school. With the social distancing guidance that we've been given and some of the other limitations that have been put upon us, we really have to take our time to make sure that we can do this right and keep students apart so we're not increasing the transmission opportunities for the disease. Real quick overview of operations. For those who are going to be looking for their transportation routes for next Monday, 3 quick ways that you can find those are eLink transportation module, which is on mychesterfieldschools.com, the school division's website. If you click on the bus routes section, you can find eLink, and by logging in with your student's birth date and/or student ID, or with their student ID number for the password, you can find your exact route, where that will be located, and what time the bus will pick you up in the morning and drop you off in the afternoon. We'll talk a little bit about transportation with our Chief Operations Officer, Josh Davis, later on. But parents may also contact their child's school and/or the transportation department to get that information. We do want to acknowledge some challenges that we'll be facing and that we have faced throughout this pandemic. Earlier on in this pandemic, when we brought our first cohort back in, we were able to put some of our drivers out on the road and help deliver food to our communities. With more drivers needed for cohorts 2 and 3, we're no longer able to do that, and all of our available drivers will be taking our elementary students to school as well as transporting our CTE students as well. We do have some drivers who are on allowed leave. That's the I'm going to blow that. That's the FFCRA Act that will allow families to take advantage of some federal leave that's been given to them if they meet certain criteria. And of course, as we've talked about over the last 3 or 4 years, we have a number of vacant positions in transportation as well as the nation, not just Chesterfield, but as the nation deals with a bus driver shortage that has caused us to become creative in solutions. Perhaps the biggest challenge that Mr. Davis and his team face is during a typical school year, our school buses will have 2 to 3 students per seat. However, to comply with the social distancing guidance that we've been provided, school divisions across the country and state, not just in Chesterfield, but across the country and state, are only able to place 1 person in a seat unless you have a sibling riding with you. That means on a school bus that could usually handle 50 or so secondary students or 66 to 70 some Elementary students, we're now able to put 26 students on a bus. So we have severely reduced capacity on our buses, which is a huge challenge as we bring all of our students back in, and one of the reasons why we didn't rush to bring all 63,000 students back in at the same time. When you look at solutions that our transportation department is working on, they've created second waves and planned double backs to cover unfilled positions and to cover extended routes that might be a little larger than we would have otherwise been able to fit with the social distancing guidance that we're following. We're also utilizing office staff where appropriate to cover unfilled positions, and we've increased our partnership with the DMV to administer the CDL learner's permit test. In terms of other solutions that our families might be able to help with, we are asking families who can transport their children to and from school this fall to consider doing so. You can update your family information in your bus stop, your transportation preferences in Parent View. That is still open and available, and we would request that you do so if you are able to take your children so that we can make bus route accommodations and open up some seats on some of the routes that we have. It's important to acknowledge that our safety team is working with principals at our various school sites as well as with the police department to support roadways that are deemed harder to navigate when it comes to traffic support. And I'll look to our elementary directors later on to give us maybe an update as to what they've seen in terms of bus arrival and certainly from Mr. Davis's standpoint, how we're doing with transportation. But I know from the schools that I visited, we didn't really have a backup problem with parent delivery. As we look at our facilities, we've had a number of questions from our parents about our HVAC systems. And so this slide looks at how we're upgrading the filters in our HVACs. And you see that more than half of our schools have already been upgraded to a MERV 13, which is a superior commercial filter. We will have all of our schools updated to MERV 13s by mid-November. And then we've also used some CARES funding to procure about 500 HEPA filters, air purifiers for our trailers and clinics. In addition, our facilities team is using some of the federal CARES dollars for other projects. They're installing approximately 1,300 partitions in restrooms. We're putting in thousands of non-touch electronic motion sensors and hardware that will help us mitigate high-touch surfaces that might otherwise accumulate student fingerprints and others. Those are typically things like light switches and flush valves. And then if you've been in one of our schools over the past several years, you've seen us start this initiative, but we really put the pedal to the metal and have really beefed up the bottle filling stations, the number of bottle filling stations that we have in our schools. We already have 230 presently installed in our schools, and that's a project that will keep going. We've also received questions over the past month about the personal protective equipment and how are we going to manage that. This slide right here has a checklist for our schools. You see the items that will be used to keep schools clean and to help students wash their hands. You see some of the PPE that our staff members are going to be wearing as they're working with and supporting our students. And then you see some of the items that we've put in our schools and on our floors to help guide traffic and to help make sure that everybody's staying in compliance with social distancing guidelines. And again, our TV crew has put together a wonderful video that gives you a 10-minute look at what the school will look like as you return to school. So if you've not had an opportunity to look at that, visit that on our Facebook page as well. Our principals and our facilities team combine to do an inventory every Wednesday and Friday to make sure that our schools have everything that they need. So that is, in a sense, a 20-minute update of a 2-hour presentation that was given to the school board. So we hope we didn't fly through it too quickly for you, but we wanted to take the time to make sure that everybody knew where we were, how we had gotten here, and where we're headed next. And of course, where we're headed next is welcoming cohort number 3 back to school on Monday, October the 26th. Before we take some questions about what cohort number 3 will look like and how we'll respond to those students and how we'll keep our schools clean and how we'll keep our students safe, I want to defer first to our elementary directors to give us your reflections on cohort 2 and their return a week ago today. And then after you're done, we'll turn it over to Mr. Davis and let him talk a little bit about the operational side. So Dr. Stefanko, if you're okay, we'll start with you, and we'll talk about what you saw in Cohort 2's return and what excited you and what the opportunities existed out there.
Well, there was so much excitement. First of all, it was great to have children back in our building. The collaboration that existed between all of our staff members, getting children in from the buses into the classroom, getting to be there personally together for the first time in a long time was just absolutely exciting to see. The kids really had a great time being in the atmosphere with other people, team building to begin the day off, and then it just built from there. You could feel the excitement just going from class to class.
There we go. I would echo everything that Dr. Safenko said, but just the idea of watching the kids get off the bus, and although they had on masks, you could feel their smiles in their eyes and see them. They lit up. They were so excited to be at school, to finally see their teachers in person, because so many of them had made connections and had an opportunity to get to know some of their classmates as well as their teachers before coming in. And you could also tell that they had really learned the procedures, and they were ready and prepared to return safely. They knew what the expectations were as far as keeping their masks on all day. I mean, they just seemed very excited, and the teachers were so excited to have the students in front of them and ready to learn. And the principals did a phenomenal job preparing their buildings and making sure that their staff were ready and that families were informed.
Yeah, I would say definitely all of the plans and preparations that our administrative teams and staff did to get ready for next week overwhelmingly paid off. It was such a smooth opening. Some of the things I observed while I was out in buildings were our face-to-face students getting to collaborate with their remote learning second half of the class virtually, which was really exciting to watch. And also got to observe teachers really taking advantage of some of the nicer weather days and taking their classes outside for outdoor learning, not just PE or recess, which was great. We encouraged a lot of that.
Last Monday was a joyous day. Cohort 1 was a great first step 3 weeks ago, and then last Monday to see a much larger number of our students come off the buses and into the buildings. I went out each of the first 2 mornings to multiple schools. I was so impressed with the organization shown by our building leaders, our staff members. They were out there ready to greet students, to get them to their classrooms. And I got to chat with some bus drivers, and we often talk about bus driver shortages and people that we don't have. I want to salute and give applause to the people that we do have and the work that they did. They all had such positive attitudes, and the first day or two can be bumpy because they're getting to learn those new students and their names and helping them be safe on the bus, and they all stepped up so well. And so I'll chat a little bit more about some of the transportation planning that got us to that point and where we're headed with Cohort 3, but again, a joyous first day, first week that went very, very well.
Thank you all for that look back at the past week. I think we've seen a number of posts on social media about families who were excited to send their children back to school and to begin to try and reinstall some sense of a little bit of normalcy in their lives. And as you all referenced, the beams, the smiling beams on everybody's faces, whether it was staff or students, were contagious. We're going to jump right into the Q&A. We had about 30 that were submitted, but I see 86 comments already in the Facebook section. So we may be here until 8 o'clock as promised tonight. You all have received the questions that were submitted in advance, but we will be pulling some off of Facebook and off of YouTube, and so we're going to create some curveballs in that manner. And Mr. Euler, as our Student Health Services rep on the board, I'm going to ask you and Mr. Davis to answer this first question. It's not in the list right here, but it's come up several times on here. Let's get this out of the way now. Masks and face coverings. Nick, who's wearing them and why? And Josh, do we have enough for everyone if somebody can't bring their own?
Thanks, Tim. In terms of masks, everyone in the building is wearing a face covering or a mask, and that includes our students and our staff members. Now, we recognize that there are some exceptions to that rule. There may be medical exemptions that are on file for some of our students, or there may be developmental reasons that a mask is not appropriate for some of our students. But in general, our students and staff are wearing face coverings in the building. Our staff members, we're first and foremost making sure that we're distancing 6 feet while in the building. But when that's not possible, we've asked that our staff members are wearing the clear face shields. So as a teacher might move out of the 6-foot bubble where he or she is teaching and get closer to the students, we've asked them to go ahead and put on a face shield for just an extra layer of protection in those situations.
And we do have a large supply of masks available to both our students and our staff members if needed. About once a week, I catch myself climbing out of my car about halfway to the building and say, oh, I need to put this on. And so, again, saw a few teachers making some gentle reminders to students as they were coming into school and climbing off the bus. Maybe the mask had slipped off. We're going to work together gently with our entire population to keep those masks on to reduce the transmission of infection and disease. And we have ample supplies and plenty of backups for those who might actually forget one day. So we're in good shape.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I'm going to bounce back over to this side of the room to one of our elementary directors. They've seen the virtual learning. Our newest students arriving have now seen what the hybrid model looks like. For those parents of 4th and 5th graders, can you better describe what asynchronous learning opportunities will look like? That is, the days that they're home working remotely from.
On the days that the students are at home working remotely, they will, as Tim said earlier, have an opportunity to still connect and check in with their with the teacher as well as with their peers. The students will check in for a morning meeting. This time will be based on the school start time. And then they'll also have an opportunity to check in at another time during the school day. And that time will vary depending on the teacher's schedule that has been shared with the families. But as well, they will also have activities that they will complete on their independently through their Canvas page or through different platforms such as Dreambox or Lexia. This will all be communicated to the child during the morning meeting of what the expectations are for him or her to complete during the course of that day. Students during this time are not expected to sit in front of a computer for 6 or 7 hours of a day. That is not the expectation. Students, the time will vary. Some students may finish their independent tasks in an hour and a half or 2 hours. Some may finish it in 4. It just depends on the student's needs and their capabilities.
Thank you, Ms. Booth. Let's keep that going a little bit and extrapolate a bit further. This parent has asked, when being told about our choices, it was stated that staying virtual would get a little more one-on-one time with the teacher, essentially more instruction time. My concern is, since I chose hybrid, is that there will be a gap between the students. Are you coming up with a plan to bridge this gap once we are in school full-time? So before we deal with the full-time piece, let's look at what the difference is in instruction time, and is there a difference between hybrid and a student who is in the virtual model, or hybrid model, sorry.
So just for clarification, kids who are in the hybrid model attend school 2 days a week, and they are following a pretty regular school day schedule. So that is a 6.5-hour day. Kids in the virtual model do have a condensed schedule, and they will now start at their school start time and continue and have a day that's a little more shortened. And while they are receiving instruction throughout the week, as opposed to the hybrid 2 days a week, those grade level teams are working together to, as much as possible, align the instruction and the standards that they're being taught.
Thank you, Dr. Fogelsong. Mr. Euler, let's come back over to you. Let's talk a little bit about testing. We've got some parents on the chat here who want to know if we're testing students before they return to school. What's our stance on that?
We are not currently testing students or staff before they return to school, and we've really deferred that to the medical experts in the community who are responsible for testing. There have been some questions regarding testing protocols for school and if that's something that can realistically be done. And one of the challenges that continues to come up with testing either staff or students that are going to be returning to school is the need to test them almost daily in order to have some faith in the testing that you're doing. And that's because when you take a test, the results are really valid for that moment. And that individual could go home or out into the community and become exposed. And so to have an ongoing faith in that test, there would really be a requirement or a need to have daily testing, which up to this point isn't something that we've been able to realistically do.
What does a student do Or what does a family member do if there's a positive test within their household?
So household exposure is a little bit different than community exposure in that the risk for exposure to members of the household is greater. So if there were a case in the household, so let's say the parent became positive with COVID-19, or the parent was even suspected of COVID-19 and awaiting a test, the rest of the family members should go ahead and quarantine. And the reason is because in the household there's just greater risk that that family member might be exposed. So as soon as there's either a diagnosed case or a suspected case of a live-in household member, the rest of the family should quarantine, should seek advice from their licensed healthcare professional or from the health department. And the advice on whether or not to test each individual in the household would really come from either the doctor or the health department.
Going to ask you to keep going one more time. Can you talk a little bit about the quarantine process? How long does that last? When is a student able to come back?
Sure.
Or a staff member, for that matter.
I think when we start to talk about quarantining, it's important to make sure that we are on the same page in terms of what some of these terms mean that we're using. So you'll hear quite a bit isolation and quarantine. And quarantine, by definition, means that that individual is currently healthy or not diagnosed with COVID-19. Isolation, on the other hand, means that that individual is either diagnosed or suspected of COVID-19. So you'll hear those two terms thrown around quite a bit. The reason we would quarantine someone is because they may have been exposed to COVID-19. Again, because they're being quarantined, that by definition means that they're currently healthy. However, due to the risk of exposure, it's recommended that they stay home and isolate as much as they possibly can during that quarantine from other members of the family and other community contacts. The quarantine process generally takes 14 days. So starting from the day you may have been exposed to a person with COVID-19, you'd be asked to quarantine for 14 days. It's also important to note that a negative test does not take away the need to quarantine. And again, that's because at any time during those 14 days, that individual may develop symptoms or may develop COVID-19. So whether or not we've had a negative test, we would ask those individuals to stay home for 14 days. On the flip side of that, isolation, which is an individual who's been diagnosed with COVID-19, is generally 10 days from either the date of diagnosis or from when the symptoms started. And there's some other factors that come into play for the doctors and health department to take a look at to make sure your symptoms have been resolving, that you're fever-free. But generally, isolation is 10 days, and quarantine is generally a 14-day period.
Thank you. Dr. High, I'm going to bounce to you next. There's a conversation going on in our chat right now about the self-assessment is what they're referring to. We're going to ask each student, each family member to do a self-assessment of their child prior to returning to school. What types of things are we looking for at that point?
So in order to do a self-assessment, we ask that families would check temperatures. There is a checklist that has been shared with schools that have shared it with principals, as well as Mr. Bullis has sent out in the family updates, where students are to check their temperature. They're looking to see if they have any symptoms like a headache, just upset stomach, or any of those kinds of symptoms. And if there's a fever, then we ask that they stay home, or if they have two symptoms, that we also ask that they stay home and then look to their health professional to determine what the next step should be.
Thank you. We're not going to let you off this easy, but we're going to keep the questions over here for a little bit longer. Mr. Euler, the descriptions that Dr. Hyde just gave, really at this time of year, could be symptomatic of a lot of different things. That's a big challenge for our parents, but why is it so important for them to be cautious at this point in time in our life?
That's a great point. We're entering a season where we typically see some of the symptoms that you'll notice on the self-assessment form. At the end of the day, we're in a pandemic, and it is crucial that we slow the spread of COVID-19 as much as possible. And one of the best ways we can do that is by remaining home when we're sick. And we ask the same thing of our staff members that we ask of our students, that if we are sick and if we're experiencing symptoms that are on that list, that it is crucial that we stay home in order to not possibly spread the virus even further were we to be carrying COVID-19. And we recognize the difficulties of trying to determine between flu symptoms and COVID-19 symptoms, for example. But the best practice is to stay home, whether it were flu season or whether we're concerned about COVID-19 with any of those symptoms, and to seek the advice of your healthcare provider.
Thank you. I'm going to come back over here to our school administration folks. Ms. Blackman just pointed out that it's not unusual in past years for some parents to give their child Tylenol and send them to school. Let's talk about what we're going to do when somebody shows up with symptoms. Where are we going to isolate them, and what are our expectations when we call a parent at that time?
So just like in the past, when children become sick, we are going to take them to the health provider within our building. So they would first go to the clinic and check out the symptoms, and if it's something that is a fever or from that checklist, then we would proceed to another location that is a little bit more isolated so that the children try to limit the spread, and then we would contact parents for them to pick up their child.
Mr. Euler, if there's a silver lining in this whole issue, it's that we now are at a point where we're, within the next several weeks, going to have a nurse in every school. Can you talk a little bit about that before we get into some of the cleaning that we're doing proactively and that we'll be doing reactively as needed?
Sure, I think that's a great term, a silver lining in a situation that we wish we weren't in. This has been a goal of ours for a number of years, to have a school nurse in every building. And as a school nurse myself, I may be a little biased, but to me it's essential that each student in Chesterfield County have access to a full-time school nurse in their building. And so I'm very proud that we've gotten to the point where we've hired a school nurse for every building in Chesterfield County. We're in the process of onboarding the very last remaining nurses that are coming on board with us, so within the next few weeks we will have all of those positions filled. And that's a big moment for us. It's been a big goal, and ultimately it's a benefit to our students to be able to have that registered nurse in the building with them daily should they need that resource.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, let's talk a little bit about what we've done to our schools to get them ready. One parent asked about, we'll start backwards and then work forwards, actually. One parent is aware of the Wednesday cleaning days, wants to know what's going to happen with cleaning after the Thursday and Friday set of students is in. Let's talk about that, and let's talk a little bit about what are we doing proactively to make sure that our schools are in good shape for our students.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bullis. And it's a very, very good point, because we have a group of students also attending on Thursday and Friday, and the building needs to be cleaned before the first group returns on Monday and Tuesday. So that cleaning takes place on Friday afternoon and evening after our students have left. Some of our internal staff, day porter staff, will work some different shifts on Fridays to support that cleaning. And of course, our contract custodians that work every night will do probably some extra vigorous activities on Fridays to ensure that that building has been well cleaned after that Thursday, Friday group is complete, and we'll be ready to welcome our Monday and Tuesday students back to a clean building. But in general, the preparation for our buildings has been very sound. We worked very, very hard over the summer here and through September to ensure that each building met the APA 2 cleanliness standards, which are where we want our buildings to be. And our contract custodians worked very hard, our management team and facilities did, and of course our building operations supervisors, which support our principals, have been very diligent, and again, working with that day porter staff. We're very proud of the condition of our buildings, and now we're going to keep them that way. We are just, again, delighted that our students are back. So with the activity, things are perhaps going to, get a little dirty through some wear and tear, but we're going to be right on top of it every day to ensure that our schools stay clean for the rest of this school year.
While you've got your mic on, let's continue with the operational look at transportation. We talked earlier about some of the challenges that the social distancing guidance has put before us. How are we responding to that, and what did it look like the first week of school?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Bullis. And I appreciate the local media talking. Pardon me, my microphone was giving me the little red blink, so Dr. High is going to help me out here a little bit. And again, remind me of the question again. We're getting back to transportation planning, and I was talking about the media assessing that challenge a little bit. And when I spoke 2 weeks ago and talked about our limited capability, Mr. Bullis's remarks early In regards to one child per seat, that's the principal factor. That really, really limits our capability. And let me thank our parents. I asked for help, we've been asking for help, and our parents that had said they're capable of transporting have really done so. And I was very confident going into Cohort 2 because we had some very good data that indicated which of our parents were planning to drive their students at our individual schools. Looked at that data and I could see that our average bus load for our Cohort 2 students was probably going to be 15 students or less at all of our schools. So that made me confident that we were going to be able to do the job, and that's what we've experienced. And so the loads were lighter thanks to our parents. Again, thank you. But again, our drivers took care of the students and transported the ones that needed that transportation. Now we're going to move into Cohort 3. So our 4th and 5th graders that need transportation are welcome to ride the bus. You've got room. Again, we're going to see some data later this week, and I'll probably feel even more confident by next Monday morning. But I believe that we will be able to transport those students. And again, we continue to thank our parents and encourage them to drive. We saw that traffic issues were very minimal, both at our bus loops and at our parent drop-off locations. Again, you have the typical first couple of days with a few hiccups, but things smoothed out very rapidly. And I'm sure the same thing will happen with Cohort 3. A couple more grades of students, a few more thousand riding the bus, a few more thousand arriving by cars. But I'm confident of our staff's ability to handle that both at our schools and with our school bus drivers.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. We'll switch over to the other side so we can swap out your mic. Ladies, this question is about the schedule, and the parent wants to know if my children are set to go on Thursday and Friday, but they're unable to, could they sub in on Monday and Tuesday so as not to miss any instruction?
So unfortunately, because we have the need to create the social distance and have limited space, kids who are scheduled to go on Thursday, Friday need to only come to school on Thursday and Friday. So they cannot switch out. However, they should, if they're unable to be in school, still should log in if they can and try to work through their Canvas assignments as much as possible.
That begets another question that was in the social media chat box, and that's if my child is either in quarantine or absent from a day, how's the student accessing makeup work?
That is the beauty of technology. So in that setting, the child can still access learning. If the child is at home quarantining and is feeling well enough to be able to participate in learning, then the child can actually still log in to connect to the morning meeting, as well as that midday check and connect time. So students still have access to learning, whether they're in the classroom for that in the hybrid model or whether they are at home. So that gives us the opportunity to allow learning to be continuous. So students don't have to necessarily be marked absent in that situation. They can still continue accessing learning.
Thank you. Next question, continuing on the scheduling road. Will there be any other calendar changes? My child will miss more time than others because of pre-scheduled days off. They're looking at the Monday and Tuesday related to Election Day and parent-teacher conferences. But I think that kind of balances out somewhere in the schedule. Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I can take it. So that's right. There are no, we don't foresee any additional calendar changes. However, there are the Election Day and Parent-Teacher Conference days coming up in November, as well as Thanksgiving and the following Friday, so the Thanksgiving break. And so they do balance out, and teachers will be working with classes about accessing their learning remotely during those breaks.
Great. I'm going to jump back to transportation real quick if we've got your mic fixed. In a recent interview with a local media, a parent said that they thought that some of the plan had an ad hoc feel to it, especially around transportation. And the parent asked to see the data supporting why parents are being asked to drive their children to and from school. How would we address that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bullis. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the planning process for building school bus routes. Our students are at the center. They are the ones that provide what we might call the demand side of the equation. You know, who do we need to transport, what day of the week, from what locations to where? And it's a very deliberate process. It's very detailed. And each school probably has anywhere from 8 to 40 bus loads that are planned. Again, you don't see 40 bus loads planned for an elementary school, but as we look ahead to Cohort 4, I've seen those plans for some of our middle schools and high schools that are more in that 20 to 40 range, whereas most of our elementary schools are, I would say, 8 to 18 bus loads. And I say bus loads, a significant portion of our students receive specialized transportation in accordance with their IEP plans. Those students are handled one by one on a very careful basis to ensure that they will receive the care and transportation that they need. So our grand total of transportation routes, one might say, is almost 2,600 routes. So it's a very, very big process, lots of detail. And again, we want to take the available buses and drivers that we have to place against that demand. So Dr. Fry and his staff have worked very, very hard throughout the summer here and then early in the fall. And the need does change a little bit. We talk about the goalpost moving a little bit, and we totally get it that some of our parents need to change their decision for one reason or another. So Dr. Fry's team is staying on their toes in regards to students that perhaps thought they were going to stay virtual but now want to come to school. And we're glad when that happens because we want to see them there, and if we can get them there, but again, we're going to make sure they have a seat on the bus. So ad hoc's probably not the best term. I would just like to say very detailed planning, and then we do our best to execute that plan. And the second part of that was looking at data. And again, I got to see some data last weekend that made me feel good when I knew that our loads were probably going to be below 15, and that is thanks to the parents. Thanks to the parents. Because if we had had to transport every student that was in Cohort 2, we probably wouldn't have had a seat for each of them. So, you know, we've got the data at each school. It varies from school to school. And as we see the capability and the ability to combine some of our routes, which will help us with that creative solution when we might not have as many drivers as we'd like, we're going to be doing that too. So lots of activity every day in the transportation department. And again, kudos to Dr. Fry and his team, and thanks again to our parents that have done their part.
Keep your mic on. Your conversation has prompted Esther to ask on Facebook. She'd like for us to describe how students will sit on a bus. Can you talk a little bit about the patterns so that we can keep as much distance as possible?
Yeah, thank you very much, Esther. We are doing our best to have some social distancing, so we set up what is a checkerboard pattern. If you were to climb on the bus, you would see a piece of tape where the students are to sit. So they won't be next to each other in the same seat unless there are siblings. And we do have some sibling pairs on almost every bus. So if brother and sister could get along for the bus ride, that really helps us too. But as you go back seat by seat, you'll see alternating positions. Student by the window, student by the aisle, student by the window, and so forth. So again, we call it that checkerboard pattern to use all 26 of our seats. And that's the best we can do with the social distancing requirements we have.
Great, thank you. I'm going to bounce back to instruction real quick. Ms. Smiley's just asked if we've considered whether or not students can log in from home on their days when they're working from home for a full day of instruction. I believe that was considered, but it presents some challenges in the classroom for classroom management, instruction, personalized differentiation, that type of thing. Could somebody tackle that one for us?
Sure. It is very complicated when you start thinking about trying to match a hybrid schedule with a virtual schedule. Dr. Fogelsong mentioned earlier that when it's a hybrid schedule, it's a full day matching our normal master schedule. And so a virtual schedule may not be in the same times, but also it gives a different dynamic if you are a classroom teacher and you're in front of a class of 8 students and you're engaging in that teaching, to shift and then start talking to your virtual children on the screen may cause some issues for classroom management. And we also want to make sure that our teachers are focusing their full attention on the children that are in front of them for the best quality education that we can give.
Let's stay on that side of the room. This parent asks, since with the emphasis on social distancing, how will teachers and students deal with traditionally shared school supplies like glue sticks, books, self-selected reading books? Are parents expected to label each individual crown in the 4 boxes that they send to school?
That's a funny question, but I'm on a journey to say that's something that I think that teachers used to ask for before COVID, is that everything is labeled before they send it to school so they know which supplies belong to which student. But no, I don't think we're going as far as asking people to label individual crowns, but each student will have a supply box or supply bag or supply bin of their own individual items. Students will not have to share any items. So I think it's important to note that. But yes, labeling things does help, but no, not every crayon.
Let's stay over there and we'll just keep going down the aisle. Dr. Fogelsong, can we talk a little bit about lunch? This parent wants to know about some changes that they heard about within the past 2 or 3 weeks that will allow our students to use the cafeteria as the student's able to transition into that phase.
So we have been given some additional guidance from risk management that has enabled us to access and use our cafeterias with while practicing safe social distancing. Some of our schools have already been able to put that into place and are using that model by bringing their kids into the cafeteria. Others are working towards that. We've been using cafeterias to store some of our additional furniture, so we're working to get that furniture stored elsewhere so that schools can set up cafeterias so that it will allow students to come through and eat in the cafeteria, but social distanced the whole time.
So our resource schedule in the hybrid model is very similar to a normal school year. And so the only difference is that our resource teachers will be traveling into the classrooms so that we can limit the transition times and touch points in the hallways. Then on the days that they are home doing remote learning, then they will have asynchronous work that matches what they've been learning in their times. We've got several different models depending on the school's creativity. So sometimes they will be working with one resource all day long. I mean, not all day long, all week. And then others have the more traditional schedule of a different resource each day.
While we get that situation fixed, let's bring Dr. High back into the conversation. The question has come up about the October 26th transition and how close it falls to the end of the first 9 weeks. Obviously, we're aware of that. What are some of the things that we're looking at with that?
So our principals have worked with our teachers to make sure that we have balanced classes for our 4th and 5th grade students who are returning. And so if a family has chosen virtual, then we'll make sure they have a virtual teacher and a hybrid teacher. When students are arriving back, we know that it's a few days before the end of the quarter, so we're working with teachers to make sure that either they have the grades in for the students or they're sharing those grades with their colleagues if there is a change in the classroom. There is opportunities for parent conferences, and so if you have questions specifically about your child to the teacher who's worked with them, then you can definitely reach out either through email or through a conference to get understanding of where your child is academically.
Dr. High, Mr. Davis, I don't know which one of you wants to tackle it. It doesn't fall in either one of your shops, but you both are supporting it. Somebody mentioned earlier about are students allowed to bring their lunch, or can they buy lunch? And actually, we don't have to buy anymore. The U.S. government has now said that students can have free lunch for the entire school year. So can they bring their own lunch? Do they have to receive a school lunch? And or how are students eligible to get that lunch at this point?
So between now and really now at the end of the school year, any student can receive a lunch as well as a breakfast. And so if a student needs to receive lunch or breakfast, they can get it from schools. But parents, you do have the option of providing lunch to your child. You know, of course, it should be in a labeled lunchbox container so that we know that it belongs to that particular child. But then, yes, they can eat the food that you've provided for them.
I'm not sure who wants to answer this question, so the first one to their mics wins. This might be an almost worst-case scenario. I guess the worst-case scenario would be reverting back to all virtual. But this parent has questioned, if a teacher tests positive and all the children in that class have to stay home for isolation, how would students get reassigned to a virtual teacher?
I'll start, and if any of my colleagues want to jump in. So if a teacher tests positive and is not showing severe symptoms and is still able to teach, then we would work with the students to have them be taught virtually by their classroom teacher. The whole class would then, if they were all being quarantined. So I think it's a case-by-case situation. If the teacher is sick, and is unable to teach, then we would work to have a substitute for those students.
Speaking of case-by-case basis, Mr. Euler, Ms. Janney has noted that what others have commented on, that our numbers in the past week haven't been as great as they had been in the 4 weeks before. If the metrics look good right now, how is the health committee grappling with the aspect that they can also be skewed or flawed by some of the outbreaks at the jails or the assisted living care facilities? How do we monitor that so we know that it's safe for children to come back?
That's a great point. So we've tried to look at the most local data possible, which takes away some of that challenge. So at least we know that whenever possible, we're looking at Chesterfield-specific data when we're looking at whether cases per 100,000 or positivity rate. We're also lucky to have the Department of Health, Dr. Samuel, the medical director from the Chesterfield Health District, on the committee with us, and he's able to speak to, as much as he's able to, recognizing confidentiality, where we're seeing these types of outbreaks and how that may be skewing the numbers, whether that's happening or not. So we try to drill down to the most local data that we can, and then we also rely on our partnership with the health department to be able to know if there's an outbreak that may be affecting our numbers in a way that we need to be aware of.
We'll stay with you for this next question as well. Will the metrics be revisited before students return on October the 26th, given that numbers are fluctuating? One day they're up, one day they're down.
So the way the committee looks at data, we review data each week together. The next time it'll be publicly reviewed with the school board is actually the day after Cohort 3 returns. And were our conditions to change, so if data were to rise and we were in a new category overall, that data would be presented on Tuesday, next Tuesday, and that would be in reference to Cohort 4 returning. So some of the slides that Tim shared earlier give you an idea of what types of recommendations may be given based on the overall score. And if we were to see ourselves rise into a moderate risk category, there would be a possible recommendation of pausing Cohort 4. Now, in order to get to the point where we would start discussions about reversing Cohort 3, we would need to see ourselves rise to even the next category, which would be the higher risk level, which at the moment doesn't seem to be in the cards based on where the data is now. But we certainly review data each week, but the next decision on next Tuesday would be focused mainly on Cohort 4.
Dr. High, a couple of questions have come in about communication, and well, I guess I could answer those as well. I'll pass them to you. What's our process for notifying folks when there is a positive case in a building?
So we've asked for staff members or for families to notify the principal. From there, there's a group of individuals who they will notify, but the direction is for them to either, if they're a staff member, to contact the Chesterfield Health Center, or for a family to check with their own health provider. Can you give me the rest of the question again?
Notifying, you're on, you've got it.
I am? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and so from there, we will notify Not individually, but we will let someone know that there has been a case at a school, and then we contact trace. So we look for any individuals who were with the individual for within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. And from there, we contact trace. Beyond that, we make sure that those individuals are notified that they may have been in contact with someone. But from there, we let it be known that there is a case in a school, and it is on our CCPS website to know where the cases have been in the division so far.
I'm going to come back to you in just a second, but I'm going to tag on because there have been several people talking about the numbers of cases within Chesterfield County Public Schools. If you go to mychesterfieldschools.com and click on the Project Restart button right in the center of the page, when you go to that landing page, there'll be a button at the top that talks about positive cases within our schools. We are committed to being transparent with the cases that we have so that people can feel safe, feel comfortable, yet feel informed and make the decisions that they need to as well. So you can see them up to the minute as of 6 o'clock this afternoon, I believe, 6 o'clock this evening. Dr. High, the question was asked, and I'm going to continue with the phrasing that you used because you actually used what they said. When we don't talk about specifics of a case and we say that there's a case in a building, this parent is concerned about the panic that it could cause because it's more general in nature. Can you talk about the legal privacy rights that we do have to worry about, whether it's for a student or a staff member?
So the privacy right is HIPAA, and so we must protect the privacy of individuals' health information. We cannot directly or indirectly provide information about a confirmed case, so we would not share a class or a grade level or in the high school a course level. We do focus on the contact tracing to make sure that we are letting those who may have been at risk notified, but we really have to protect the rights because of the HIPAA policy.
Well, I've got you on since I left you alone for the first half hour. I'm going to stay there too.
Thanks.
We have a parent who wants to know about substitutes. Do we have enough to cover what we need? So we're going to answer the question, then we're going to give a free advertisement for how parents can become involved, and then we'll pass it right next door to Mr. Davis, and he can talk about how folks can help us with the bus driver situation as well.
We have substitutes, but we could always use more. So I'll start with that advertisement. If you are interested in becoming a substitute, please go to our website and apply. We will welcome you and get you ready to be a substitute as soon as possible. In terms of the number of substitutes, we do have substitutes, but we've also worked with our central office staff, who many of them are endorsed to teach either pre-K to 5th grade or middle or high school specific content areas. So we have, I believe, around 87 individuals who could potentially be called into sub to one of our classrooms throughout the year. So we are really trying to pull together, and all hands are on deck to make sure that we are providing a successful education for all of our students.
Mr. Davis, your PSA for bus driver vacancies?
You know, all of us are facing individual circumstances as we go through this pandemic. And some of our bus drivers that were very loyal employees for many years face some circumstances that set them in a position where they can't help us right now, whether it was due to themselves being in a risk group due to their age or health conditions, or the fact that they had children that weren't in school and they were struggling with child care and had the ability to take some leave. So we haven't had quite as many hands on deck. And perhaps you that are listening are seeing different conditions in your life where maybe now might be the time that you could learn to be a bus driver for Chesterfield County Public Schools. We have a great training program. You would be hired as a trainee. You would earn wages, fine wages, I should say modest. We are still seeking to improve the pay of our drivers. There were a couple of nice increases that were programmed last year, placed on hold due to the pandemic and the little budget crisis that we had for a while, but we're going to move forward, hopefully, with a finer budget. But we just want to encourage anyone that's considered becoming a school bus driver to come join our team. Let us train you, work with our children. It's so rewarding, and we will assist you in every way to get that license. And if you have a child, you can bring that child on the bus. If you have a child attending a school, we'll let you drive that route. So thanks again for that opportunity, Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I want to put a bow on the communication piece real quick and go back and just reconfirm how we're going to communicate. Kim and Selena have chimed in, and then I love this name. If it's a legitimate Facebook name, Fossil Fuel wants to know this as well. For the parents who are in a building where there's been a positive case, those who are directly impacted, meaning they're considered close contacts under the Virginia Department of Health's definition, 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, would receive a personal phone call from the school administration. They would be notified that they've been in close contact with an individual who has tested positive, and they would be asked to begin quarantining and to begin checking with their healthcare provider. All of the other families in the school will receive an email from the school administration acknowledging that there is a positive case in that school and stating that their children, if they have not been contacted directly, their children or the family that is, are not impacted by the case in the school. The question came up, will we be notified by an individual class? And again, it could be up to an individual teacher to self-disclose that, but because of privacy reasons that Dr. High referenced before, we are not able to share specific locations or specific classrooms or specific individuals. We're parents up here as well, and so we know that there is a great interest in this as well, but we're going to treat everybody else like we would treat your child. We're not going to disrupt the privacy rights that are afforded to your child, and we're not going to disrupt the privacy rights that are afforded to others as well. We know that there is a great interest in this, and we will be as transparent as we can, right down to sharing information to the greatest extent allowable by law. But you will know when there is a case in your school. You will know what we are doing proactively and reactively to deal with that case, and you will be afforded every opportunity to ask questions to the extent that we can respond to them. So I hope that helps to clarify that a little bit. Mr. Davis, I'm going to come back right to you. We talked about PPE in the opening presentation. This parent wants to know, how can Chesterfield County Public Schools ensure that we have enough PPE to keep staff and students safe when this is still an issue across our nation? What does the current PPE supply look like?
As Mr. Bullis showed in his opening presentation, PPE falls in quite a few different categories. We've got some consumable things such as hand sanitizer. We have a really good pipeline of hand sanitizer. We mentioned the mask, some of the things that people wear. We're doing very, very well with a fine stockpile of some of those items. One item that we've struggled a little bit with is gloves. The gloves that are worn, especially in our clinics. And Mr. Euler's put out some information to make sure that our staff members understand that they don't have to wear a glove when they're escorting a student down the hall. It's when they're going to perhaps be working much more closely with them if there's going to be perhaps a bodily fluid event. So we had some gloves come in late last week. We've got more shipments on the way. So again, I've got better confidence. But you know, I expect there'll be a few bumps along the road in regards to the pipeline. And Dr. Doherty has encouraged us to seek a 3-month supply. And I can't sit here and say that we have the 3-month supply of everything that we've stocked up, but we are moving towards that guideline. The funding that we received from the CARES Act is going to assist us in developing those stockpiles. We're actually seeking additional warehouse space. We have an inventory system where our schools are reporting to us twice a week, you know, what their reserves look like, and then they can place a work order to get some more supplies. And we're continuing to learn during these first few weeks. The demand's obviously growing as we bring more cohorts back, but again, lots of PPE on hand right now. We're going to continue to order that. It's one of our top priorities.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Ms. Wyatt asked if students are able to send bottles of hand sanitizer for their children to keep at their desks. The answer is yes, as long as it's alcohol-based. That is certainly something that we would encourage at this point in time. Mr. Euler, let's bounce back over to you. This parent has seen a number of our photos that we've posted out there on social media and that we've put on the website and that others have shared as well, and they've seen some face shields on staff. When is the appropriate time to wear a face shield on top of a mask, and how will these face shields be used?
Sure. So as I shared earlier, a mask is required by anyone in the building, whether it's students or staff members. And our staff members are generally going to be teaching in an area that's already been pre-measured and is 6 feet away from their students. So as they're teaching in that area, they're going to be teaching in their face covering or their mask. When they start to leave that area, and we recognize that there's a need for a teacher to get out of that 6-foot square and get closer to students at sometimes to be able to facilitate the learning process. So when they get closer to students, we've asked that they wear a face shield. And what this does in addition to the mask is it provides another layer and another barrier between the teacher and the student when they're closer together in situations like that. And that provides extra protection for the teacher, the staff member. It also provides extra protection for the students.
Thank you. I'm going to bounce back over here to instruction real quick. Natasha says she was told that she has to withdraw her child if she wants her to go all virtual. Can somebody tackle that one? We don't withdraw children. We're going to have virtual and or hybrid, but then there is a homeschool model that parents can choose from. Can somebody unpack those?
So I think it's important to note that parents were given an option to choose between hybrid or virtual. And if someone happened to miss that deadline after principals and schools had created class roles and sections to determine how many hybrid and how many virtual classes they needed, that parent may have been told that they were put on a waiting list until a section came open. So it's not that the parent, if you choose virtual, you have to withdraw your child. That is not at all it. Your child is still enrolled. And you're encouraged to allow the child to continue to engage in the hybrid model until an opportunity is available for the virtual setting. But you do have an option to either choose hybrid, which is the 2 days a week, choose the all virtual model, or homeschool. Those are the 3 options that are currently available. But again, it's very challenging for a school to accommodate, when someone wants to go back and forth between those different settings, because we have to remember the student to teacher ratio is very important to students being successful in the academic setting. So that's just maybe one of the reasons why this parent was told that not to withdraw, but the idea that you may have to wait a little bit of time to be able to make that switch.
Let's keep unpacking that if we can, and Ms. Booth, it can be you or somebody else if you want to look either way and get one of your partners involved. The staffing component as well, when we're talking about a wait list, we still have to meet state requirements for class sizes. Can you talk about the staffing puzzle that you all have had to put together over the last month?
Yes, you said it just right, a puzzle. It's very interesting because you have to be able to make sure that when you're looking at the hybrid model, when you bring back this group of students into the classroom for the 2 days, you can't have a full capacity. So you can't bring 24 students in on Monday and Tuesday face-to-face. You have to be able to split that balance, to create a balance. So principals have had to reevaluate almost daily as parents change their minds about their decisions. And that creates a very difficult situation where principals have to notify teachers that they're going to be moving to a different setting, or notify families that they're going to have to move to a different setting to accommodate those changes. But we do have to meet the state requirements for student-teacher ratios. So that also plays a role into how many students can be assigned to a virtual class setting. So those are a lot of the factors that the principal has to take into consideration when a parent calls and asks to have their child switched to either situation.
So it's not just folks who are looking to go virtual, I assume. The changes that we've undergone have created angst, and people sometimes like to see then make sure that things work. We saw that with virtual. I'm not sure I really want to stay virtual. Oh, yeah, it worked. Then we introduce some reentry of students, and oh, well, virtual's working just fine, so I'll stay home. That change creates some natural angst. Talk a little bit more about the wait list, if you could. We've got some folks who are interested in going from virtual to in-person, and then some folks who say, oh, well, in-person's working, I'll try that. So,
So just to echo what Mrs. Booth said, schools have worked very hard to establish classes to create a balance for hybrid models, as well as meet the standards of quality for our staffing. And right now, they, in most situations, are spread very thin in terms of meeting both of those settings. And so to make a switch, there isn't often that space allowed to go from virtual back into hybrid in a classroom. That request can be made to the principal, and if they have the space, they may be able to accommodate. If not, they may just ask a parent to wait on a waiting list, or patiently for another parent to make that choice. However, I will just say that switching back and forth can be very disruptive to a student. And so we encourage parents to just let the child accommodate to the setting that they're in. Teachers are working very hard now to reestablish relationships and routines and procedures and classroom community. And switching back and forth isn't always conducive to the best learning environment.
So, Mr. Euler, somebody's asked you to pull out your crystal ball, and they want to know what the metrics are to return to 5 days of in-person instruction and what the target is to meet that goal.
Well, I think that ultimately is all of our goal, to see us return to a 5-day instruction model for our students. It's important to note that our primary goal right now is to phase back in the cohorts in the way that the school board has laid out. And once we reach that milestone and have our cohorts back to a hybrid setting, then some of the focus starts to shift on when is it an appropriate time to transition to 5-day-a-week learning. If you notice in the recommendations, again to reference the slides that Mr. Bullis shared earlier, the recommendations for the lowest category, the dark green category, mentions that VDH says that we should start to look at 5-day in-person learning in that category if we can maintain the mitigation strategies that we've talked about today. So that would include things like masking, social distancing, cleaning, contact tracing, things along those lines. So as we are able to phase our cohorts back into a hybrid setting and we start to look at data that may be staying in those lowest and lower categories, the next question will be, can we facilitate with staffing all of the mitigation strategies that we're expected to keep? Can we facilitate a full-time return to 5-day in-person learning?
Thank you, Mr. Euler. Dr. Hyde, next two questions are coming your way. We spent almost all of tonight talking about elementary at this point in the last 15 minutes, so I do want to acknowledge that there are other students who will be returning in cohort number 3. A parent wanted to know why we would bring back some high school students, meaning the career and technical education students at our 2 CTC campuses, but not all of our high school students. Can you explain the credentialing needs that are impacting that?
So we have included the CTC students into Cohort 3 to address some essential career credentialing. Many of the certifying agencies include clinical and field hours that students must obtain in order to get the credentials, and so having them to be in person so that they can do laboratory application will help address those requirements for them to be able to get the credentials by the end of the year. Still, as we're entering during the hybrid learning, the students are using a flipped instructional model with home-based knowledge acquisition and then the in-person laboratory applications when they're returning that 1 day a week while they are in Cohort 3 return.
Thank you. I'm going to stay with you if we could. We addressed some of it at the beginning, but why aren't we bringing middle and high school students back quicker than the current phase-in model calls for?
Mm-hmm. So we've been following state guidelines of utilizing a phased approach to resume in-person instruction. And so we started with the guidelines that we should focus on our vulnerable populations and our younger students, so pre-K3 as well as our special education students. And so as we continue to phase in, we're in phase 3 in Virginia, which will allow us to begin to bring in grades 4th and 5th grade. We're phasing in smaller groups to make sure that we can follow the guidelines of social distancing, cleaning, to help with transportation, making sure that we're able to bring students back safe rather than do it all at once and have to mitigate some of those issues that could come up. We're taking a little bit slower approach, but honestly, Chesterfield has done much quicker than a lot of surrounding school divisions in bringing back students. And so we're doing our best and as quick as we possibly can within that every 2-week period, as long as the guidelines and protocols allow us to.
I will speak for just one person, but the Chesterfield County residents who were out at the soccer fields over the weekend were favorite targets of our friends from Henrico, wanting to know how things were going. And so no pressure, HCPS, but your parents were very eager to know exactly how our transition back to reentry of student learning was going. Mr. Euler, let's begin to wrap up and use the last 10 minutes to put a bow on everything. First of all, again, it continues to come up here. Masks, face coverings. Everybody's going to wear one. Let's go back and talk about why again, and then I'm going to pass you to Mr. Davis so that he can talk about for those children in the special education realm or who have another health condition that won't allow them to wear masks, what we're going to be doing to protect those kids and the kids they're in class with.
Well, I think the why that we're wearing masks or face coverings is a really important point. And I've said this once before about things we're doing that are really crucial to slow the spread of COVID-19. And masks are at the top of the list. We're told by research that wearing face coverings helps to cut down on the spread of COVID-19. We're aware that COVID-19 is spread by droplets, maybe spread by smaller droplets. And those sorts of things are things that wearing a face covering can protect against and can provide protection not only for you but for others in the building, in the classroom. So we're dedicated to trying to slow the spread of COVID-19 and making sure we're being responsible with our protocols and procedures in the building. And a big feature of that is to make sure that we're all wearing masks in the building, again, to protect not only ourselves but others in the classroom from the spread of COVID-19.
Mr. Davis, we have some students that are unable to wear masks for medical reasons or health reasons. Can you talk a little bit about what we're going to do to support those children and the children around them?
Yes, Mr. Bullis, I do want to do that. I also want to add that our bus drivers are equipped with masks. You know, again, there may be the day where the parent and the child has forgotten to have the mask on before they enter the bus, so the bus driver will have his or her eyes available and a mask to give those students right away. And same thing happens if they come off the parent drop-off line. The schools are equipped with masks. But again, there are some circumstances for some children that may have bona fide medical reasons not to wear a mask, perhaps especially true in the special education environment. And we have ordered some desk shields, and they should begin to arrive this week. I was a little disappointed in the supply chain. We had ordered them 5 or 6 weeks ago, told it was going to be a 4-week delivery, but it's taken a little bit longer. But several hundred of the desk shields should be arriving. We heard a tip facilities did this morning that they were on the way, and I didn't hear yet whether they did arrive today, but I was looking towards next week, and hopefully it'll be by the end of this week. So we'll get those desk shields. What is a desk shield? It's, if I'm the student, the shield will be in front of me and on both sides, and it's to, again, protect the other folks in the room from that individual that's not wearing the mask.
Thank you. Dr. Fogelsong, Ms. Booth, Dr. Stefanko, you all were in a number of schools last week. Can you just describe what you all saw when it came to the wearing of masks? I want to reassure folks that this is occurring, that it is being watched, monitored, and enforced, and maybe even talk about what's that first step, the teachable moment part, and then what do we do from there if there's a refusal to.
So I'll start with the first part. It was great to see all the kids come off the buses, out of the car, drop off, and I would say 99% of them remembered to have their mask on immediately. The parents had done a phenomenal job teaching that prior to coming to school. So like Mr. Davis said, if the child got off and there wasn't a mask, or they just simply hadn't put it on yet, there are gentle reminders, teachable moments about to put the mask on and why. So as we're going from class to class, transitions in hallways, it's all of what elementary does, which is learning how to do school, and wearing masks is just part of that now. And so when you walk into a classroom, it's like we've done that for forever. Really was not an issue at all.
And I'll just piggyback on that to say there were very few students that I saw on my visits and observations that were having a problem with wearing masks. As Dr. Stefanko said, it's become part of the norm in the schools. So thank you, parents. You've done a phenomenal job preparing them. I know in many of our schools we have lanyards now that kids are using to hold on to their masks for when they are outside and they get a little bit of a break, or they're at lunch and they get a time to take their masks off, so that masks aren't being dropped on the floor or, left behind anywhere.
So this is really next Monday will be our first day of school, so to speak. Our teachers are becoming pros at the elementary level of making sure that the transition process is a smooth one. Ms. Breitenbach has asked, what does that first couple of days of transition look like? How are students reacquainted with the school? How are they taught the rules? There's a different way that we've always expected them to behave in the hallways, but we have arrows and signs, and we're really expecting a lot of opportunity to stay together yet stay apart. What does that first couple of days of transition look like?
Very similar to what it would have looked like if we started school on a typical school year. We believe that, behavior is learned just like math and reading are. So teachers are going to take that time to practice the expectations, revisit the expectations. Morning meetings will center around a lot of that. But reminders and just modeling and showing them what is expected. And there are a lot of visuals that are placed around the school to kind of, remind students of what they should be doing. That these include, photos, so it's not just, or visual images, so it's not just words for our little ones. But for our 4th and 5th graders, they'll be ready. They'll know what to do.
Thank you. Mr. Euler, let's talk about worst case scenario that we have to step back. What would the committee be looking for? And then I'm going to transition back to our instructional friends, whether it's Dr. High or our directors, and talk about, are we ready for that virtual learning environment if we have to go back to that point?
And like I said earlier, the committee is monitoring data weekly. And things we're looking for, again, to tie it back to the presentation that Mr. Bullis went through in the beginning, are changes into those different categories according to the CDC school indicators and the attached VDH recommendations. And one benefit to coalescing around these CDC and VDH indicators is that we have, for the first time, really direct state guidance on when we should be thinking about certain things. So if we were to transition into the higher or highest risk category, then you would see recommendations, and the committee would at least start to have discussions on, would it be appropriate to pull back a cohort or two, and that would be in order to align with the VDH recommendations. So for the higher risk category, VDH would recommend that pre-K to 3 and special education be focused on. So were we to get to that point, there'd need to be some discussions amongst the committee to see if it would be in our best interest to recommend to pull back cohorts 4 or 3.
If we had to pull back, not that we want to be in that state, but we're confident that the virtual learning that we've demonstrated over the course of the first 6 to 7 weeks of school is ready to take on that for 100% of the children if we had to.
Our administrators are unbelievable, and they've already worked very diligently on coming up with plans for every kind of scenario. So if we had to pull back, I feel very confident. I think I could speak for my colleagues to say we hit it out of the park with virtual. And so it would not be hard at all to just go back to that without even transitioning the children again. They would stay with their teachers that they currently have, and so we'd keep that consistent and move back into the virtual world that they're accustomed to.
So let's end on a positive note. We won't talk about going back. We're going to look forward. Cohort 1 transitioned. Some of our special education students transitioned well. Cohort number 2, which began last Monday, from all accounts, has been a great transition. Dr. High, talk a little bit about our teachers and our administrators and the job that they've done, and then we'll get to families as well as supporting. But talk a little bit about, Dr. Stefanko used the term knocking it out of the park. Our teachers and staff members have knocked it out of the park.
Yes, I totally, wholeheartedly agree. Our teachers have knocked it out of the park, as well as our administrators. This has been an unprecedented time for teachers, and they have worked diligently, have bent when they needed to bend, one way or the other, but they have worked hard. Each day they are working as in PLCs to ensure that they are working and creating some consistency for the students so that students will have a similar experience. Our administrators, we are meeting with them weekly to provide information as well as to gain their input and feedback on how we continue to improve and make sure that our students come back or continue to have a successful education. And we will continue to do that regardless of what happens next, whether it's having to step back, move forward, bring in 5 days a week. We have been up for the challenge. We will continue to be up for the challenge and work as a team, and really believing that we are one CCPS.
Thank you. And as we segue into thanking parents for their support, we acknowledged earlier that the majority of us up here have been parents or are parents of school-age children at this point. Ms. Hopkins asks, does anyone on the school board have children? I think we're at 17 total between the 5 school board members, 15 school-age children. So they sit in your shoes and sit in your seats on a daily basis, whether it's virtual or in person. They've had children in both. So when we say we have an elected school board that represents the constituency, if we're talking about families as a constituency, you are very well represented, and there is a lot of empathy there for you as well. But as Dr. Hyde just talked about, the parents or the staff and the administrators who have done a phenomenal job, we couldn't be in this position without the support of our families either. They've been with us through some.
You know, I think we've talked a lot about the family-school partnership, and it's just so important. So as we head into Cohort 3, just as we did with Cohort 2, we thank you for your support, the preparation of your students to come back to school, your patience as we might hit a few hiccups along the way. But again, just thank you for that partnership. If you have questions, reach out to your school administrator, your teachers, to help get those specific questions for your students answered. Otherwise, we are ready and excited to see our 4th and 5th graders come back.
And with that, it is 8 p.m. We want to be respectful of everybody's time, whether you're at home or sitting up here on the panel. We've hoped that we've given you some opportunity tonight to not only ask questions, but to become better informed about whatever situation fits you best. We've said from the get-go that this is not something that we created as a school division. It's not something that parents created, but yet we're forced to work together, and we want to work together to find solutions that meet the needs of all of our students and that best serve our students so that they continue to learn and grow. And so as we bring back cohort number 3 next Monday and look ahead to eventual return of cohort number 4, being our middle school and high school students, you have our commitment, parents and families, to continue to serve your children, who are our children as well, to the best of our abilities. And so with that, we encourage you to stay tuned and stay engaged. Look for the Friday family updates. Visit our website, mychesterfieldschools.com. All of the information that we've shared is bookmarked either there or on our family resource hub. Please continue to review it, continue to stay engaged, and we look forward to seeing you in our schools soon. Thank you for your continued support of Chesterfield County Public Schools, and have a great night.